evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Here are your top stories. In labor, but no ambulance able to get to them. This family's story as code blacks continue across the region. Doug Ford is fighting a summons to appear at the Emergencies Act inquiry in Ottawa. Documents filed by the government cite irreparable harm if he appears. And a promise to build new homes leads to sweeping new proposed regulations by the province that could also impact conservation authorities. We begin tonight with our continued coverage of ambulance code blacks throughout the region. That's when there are no ambulances available to respond to a situation. The County of Essex may rescind the emergency it declared last week because of these code blacks by the end of this week. But as Dale Molnar reports, the problem is far from being rectified, with 2 more code blacks issued in the last 10 days.
This is little Colson Redmond. He came into the world a month premature last May, but when his mom went into labor, there were some scary moments.
I went to bed on the 10th, and I started getting really bad back pain, so I called Robert down, and it just, within the hour, it got so severe that I told him, like, we need to go to the hospital now and to call an ambulance.
Jocelyn was throwing up, so Robert called 911, but got a shocking surprise.
Asked for an ambulance, and they, to be honest, just nonchalantly, it was so normal. They said, we don't have one, we don't know when we can send one. We will call back every hour and check on you.
But they didn't wait. They went to Met Hospital a few minutes away where Jocelyn had the baby without incident.
I've never had to call an ambulance before, and the one time I do, they weren't there to help us. It was really scary. We're just lucky we're 8 minutes from the hospital, but if we weren't, like, what are you supposed to do?
When there's no ambulance immediately available, EMS calls this a code black. These situations have become so frequent, the County of Essex declared an emergency on October 17th, but it may be lifted soon.
The last few days, we've seen the code blacks reduced to only 2 code blacks over the weekend, and we're only for a few minutes. I would say in the next day or two, we might see a shift in terms of from the declaration to more of a maintenance or a period before we actually rescind completely.
McNamara says they have started triaging some calls, and the health unit is offering to second nurses to deal with heavy call volumes. But they are still waiting for the Ministry of Health to give paramedics more flexibility in how they handle the patients.
More autonomy for the EMS personnel to direct where individuals should be going. As you know, you call 911, the ambulance comes to the door, picks up the patient. There's only one thing left to do at the hospital.
Well, we need to get more ambulances out there, obviously, more paramedics. I know I'm in the healthcare field, so I know about shortages and whatnot.
The health ministry tells CBC News it has a 4-point strategy to tackle the offload delays at hospitals, which lead to the code blacks. They include facilitating non-ambulance transportation for stable patients. McNamara calls them a good start. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Premier Doug Ford was back in the legislature today after a missing question period yesterday. He's facing questions about fighting a summons to appear at the Emergencies Act inquiry in Ottawa. The provincial government has filed documents to a federal court asking for the summons to be quashed, stating irreparable harm will be done if he appears. Lorenda Redekop shows us the dramatic debate.
Will he come clean and commit today to speaking with the Commission?
No surprise, the first question for Premier Doug Ford today was about the inquiry in Ottawa. His response?
This is a federal inquiry into the federal government's use of the Federal Emergencies Act.
I'd like to hear the word federal one more time, Speaker.
The Premier also repeated the government's message that this was a policing matter for Ontario, not a political one.
This Premier is choosing to hide behind parliamentary privilege. Parliamentary privilege? That's baloney, and everybody in this room knows it.
In legal documents, government lawyers argue that under parliamentary privilege, politicians can't be compelled to testify, and that irreparable harm would occur if Ford and former Solicitor General Sylvia Jones were to appear.
Other political leaders, Mr. Speaker, aren't afraid to talk to this commission. Why is this Premier shaking in his boots?
The government House leader took over for the Premier after one question, repeating Ford's answer.
Because it is a federal inquiry into the federal government's use.
The opposition pointed out other politicians are appearing.
Is the mayor of Windsor a police officer, yes or no? No. Is the Prime Minister of Canada a police officer, yes or no? No.
One legal expert expects the province will win in court.
The law is perfectly clear. A member of a legislative assembly cannot be compelled to testify in a proceeding during a parliamentary session. He may waive the privilege, as Prime Minister Trudeau has waived the privilege, but he is not compelled to do so, and he cannot be forced to testify.
He may win in court with parliamentary privilege, but he's already lost in a higher court, which is public opinion. And by continuing to refuse to testify, he's losing more and more in that court every day.
The government is asking for an urgent court hearing on November 1st, or as soon after that date as possible. The commission had asked Ford and Jones to testify on November 10th. Loretta Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
We continue to analyze the results of Monday's municipal election. Voter turnout in Windsor was a little more than 31%. Ward 2, which represents Sandwich Town, had the lowest turnout of all. Since the realignment of Windsor's wards for the 2010 election, Ward 2 has consistently ranked as one of the lowest voter turnouts in the city. Ward 8, which represents a part of East Windsor, had a lower turnout in 2014. One Sandwich Town resident says more needs to be done to help residents vote.
I'm really fearful as to where the polls are, that to make sure the polls are accessible to those that cannot get to a car. Why should they take a taxi? Why should they pay anything else to do? So there has to be all kinds of types of voting for people, online, in person, advanced, all of that to reach the population.
Another Sandwich Town resident says others were upset that more advanced polling opportunities were not set up in the community. The city had 2 days in Micmac Park for residents to vote early. CBC News has reached out to newly re-elected Ward 2 councillor Fabio Costante, but he was not available to speak today. We also reported this week Ward 7 will have a new councillor. Juven Gill had won the seat in a 2020 by-election, but lost Monday's election. He says he did his best and will finish out his time on council. Gill says being the self-described lone diverse person on council was difficult.
Engaging in politics for last more than 30 years, I seen it more of, you can say, some kind of hate that was there, that I cannot do anything much of needed to be done. But this is need to be understanding to the people, like how they want. I think that is what we need to work towards to improve. If we can see it is the fourth diversity in Canada, and then we don't want to accept that diversity on the level of jobs we are doing.
Did you have any accounts yourself where you felt that hate or heard something?
No, I seen it on the Facebook. Sometimes I feel at the doors too.
Ontario is proposing sweeping new housing regulations. It's called the More Homes Built Faster Act, and it's shaking up the approvals process in a number of ways.
The legislation supports our new plan to further reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies that delay construction and increase costs for home buyers and renters. It also supports greater density near transit, as well as measures to protect and help home buyers and also use provincial lands as sites for more attainable housing.
This is part of the province's promise to build 1.5 million homes in 10 years. Some of the changes include reducing developer charges, allowing more units on one residential lot, and pursuing rent-to-own programs. It's also identified 29 municipalities where a bulk of new housing will need to be built to reach provincial goals. Windsor is on that list, expected to build 13,000 new homes by 2031. CBC has made a request to the city for comment, but has not yet received one. Part of these plans to develop more housing includes a provincial proposal that could also strip back the powers of conservation authorities. Here are some of the key points of what's proposed in this legislation. It would peel back dozens of regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act around how the authorities oversee developments. If passed, the terms conservation of land and pollution would be removed in matters related to permit decisions. The province would also ask conservation authorities to identify land suitable for housing development. Conservation authorities own and manage 145,000 hectares of land. For more on what's at stake, I'm joined by Tim Burney, the CAO of the Essex Region Conservation Authority. Thanks for doing this, Tim.
No problem. Nice to hear from you. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, you as well. And just to start, what is your reaction to this latest proposal?
Well, nobody should be surprised that we're looking at some tweaks and alterations and even wholesale changes. The government had forecasted it. It's a continuation of their earlier mandate. We understand the intent, but sometimes we, question, the methodologies. The most concerning issues is cutting back on the opportunity of a conservation authority to provide input in the planning process. To do this work and to do this job, first and foremost, you need to educate people. You need to inform people. You need to try to provide appropriate advice to people. If you're simply regulating within a defined regulated area and you're not advising ahead of time, like through the planning process, through the Planning Act, of future issues that you as a proponent or you as a developer might be facing, well, just to hit you at the tail end of a planning process when you're trying to get a permit, that you fail. We both fail. It sets up an immediate confrontation because you haven't been informed of what concerns might be ahead of you, in hazard lands, in flood-prone areas, in wetlands, in erodible soils.
Some people might look at this and worry that this might mean that important lands in our region might be up for grabs by the province to build housing when housing should not be built on those lands. Is that a correct expectation, or what is your takeaway ultimately, if you can summarize it in a sentence?
It is imperative that people and development are protected from the potential impact of hazards. We've just gone through all-time high lake levels and all-time critical riverine flooding. People still want to be around those areas, next to those areas, to view water, to be near water. But we have to make sure that they're safe. Removing certain pieces of regulation or process creates a worry that people will be uninformed, inadequately protected, and municipalities like the City of Windsor, Lakeshore, Tecumseh, LaSalle, they will be the ones exposed to the risk and liability of allowing people to be inadequately protected. It's not about stopping development. Development is important, and development's the lifeblood of our economy and our society. But development needs to take place in a measured fashion, and we all need to be cognizant of that.
Thank you so much for that, Tim. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Katerina.
Tim Burney is the CAO of the Essex Region Conservation Authority.
This Nova Scotia family was excited to buy their first home earlier this year, but the game has changed, financially speaking.
Our mortgage has increased by almost 38%. So this has seriously impacted all our budget and planning.
Compared to the summer, they are paying hundreds more in interest each month.
I'm paying almost the same amount that I was paying as rent in interest payment, which is not making sense at all.
Those increases will keep coming for Canadians with variable rate mortgages and other debts. The Bank of Canada has increased interest rates for the 6th time since March. The increases are the bank's main tool to clamp down on inflation as the price of almost everything goes up.
Inflation's not going to fade away by itself. And if we ignore the problem, if we're half-hearted in our response, inflation, Canadians will have to continue enduring high inflation. They'll have to continue to cope with the anxiety of high inflation. Nobody wants that.
The central bank is trying to reduce demand in the economy to cool things off. Interest rates going up can do that. Today's hike was less than some experts predicted, but that doesn't mean Canadians should expect these moves to stop anytime soon.
Clearly, there's still some work to do in order to bring that inflation rate lower, and we, in fact, think that it's only by late 2023 that inflation will be at a place where they're going to be comfortable.
Back in Nova Scotia, the Saget family is putting off major purchases so they can keep making those increasing mortgage payments.
Maybe in future when the interest rate will going to go down, it might get better for me, but at the moment this is really a painful punishment that I'm facing.
Anis Haidari, CBC News, Calgary.
I just want to acknowledge the technical issue earlier. We have my mic back, so that is wonderful. And we also have Josiah Sinanen with us.
Hello, Kat.
Josiah, we're used to seeing you for weather updates, but through your work with Afternoon Drive, you also do a number of really interesting stories about the community, and there's something really neat happening in Harrow.
That's right. There is some special guests in Harrow right now.
Okay.
And this is a really funny story, Kat. I also don't know how I became kind of the bird guy, but
I
it's
love
happening.
That.
I think the birds
Lean
found me.
into it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Well, it's about peacocks. Peacocks are loose in the town. We first learned about this thanks to Harrow resident Sherry Weir. She posted a photo of a mating pair in her backyard, and she asked, "Who do I call about peacocks?" And I thought this was hilarious. So apparently they were jumping back and forth between her and her neighbor's fence. They fed them some millet and corn, and then they disappeared out of the backyard.
Okay, so do we know how they ended up in her backyard?
So I did some digging, Kat, and there's a couple different theories going around. The most popular thing is that this is possibly someone's pet. So Wings Rehabilitation Center have offered to take in the peacocks if they should be captured. No one has claimed it to be their pet yet, and they said it's likely that it's someone's pet simply because they're not native to Ontario. So someone was breeding these birds at some point and they got loose. But we'll have to see what they say. So I did get in touch with Animal Control. They're the ones who'd be capturing them. They said this isn't the first time that peacocks have been spotted in Essex County. They've also been found in the woods a few years ago. And actually on Afternoon Drive, I did a discussion with our host about this, and we had a texter text in and say, a month ago I saw a male peacock in a field near Colchester. So we might have a secret wild population of peacocks.
So we should all be on the lookout.
We should all be on the lookout, and we want to make sure they're okay because my guest Sherry Weir was saying that it was actually loose on the main road, so they were worried it would be hit by a car or something like that. So if you do see them, do contact Animal Services Control in Essex.
And where do they come from, though, Josiah?
Well, it is kind of, that's the thing we're not sure about. We think it's because someone was breeding them and they escaped. It might be someone's pet that they just kind of lost control of. But regardless of that, they are not native to Ontario. They will be able to survive the winter, apparently, which is the fun part there. But they're difficult to capture. So contact Animal Services Control, especially if you see them roosting at night. That's the best opportunity to get in touch with them. And you can also send me your pictures, too. If you have a sighting, hashtag Essex County Peacock Watch. I'm starting it tonight.
Amazing.
So send me your pictures, and we'll keep an eye on that.
Thanks, as always, Josiah.
Yes,
appreciate
thank you,
it.
Kat.
Let's take a live look outside there. The sun is setting. Look at that gold over the river. Although it was a rainy day today, it was pretty gloomy for the most part, so it's so nice to see the sun poking out. Colette will be here after the break with more. Colette Kennedy joins us now for a look at our weather forecast. Colette, it was very much a gloomy fall day today.
Yeah, it really has been that kind of a day, right? You just
mood.
Yes, you just want to be kind of cozy, a cup of tea, hot chocolate, whatever it is that kind of makes you feel a little bit warmer because it gets in your bones a bit, even though our temperatures aren't that cold. But I know that feeling. And this is what we're kind of looking at with this system as it keeps making its way through, right? We've seen the winds change direction, blustery at times around towards the northwest. We'll get some clearing tonight. I say partial because there may be a few pockets where the clouds are just a little more stubborn to be breaking up. But then we will get into some sunshine into tomorrow, and it carries on into the weekend. So once we lose this system and the showers associated with this front, we get another dry spell that's coming our way. Well, that is at least until Monday, which is a very important day, of course, for our trick-or-treaters for Halloween. So that's still several days off, and you always hear me say I'll be tweaking the forecast as we get closer because it's just more accurate the closer we can get to doing that forecast. As I do, we'll be updating you. The daytime highs, Windsor 17. If you think, well, no, that didn't feel that way this afternoon. It was around 10 degrees this afternoon, so that was at midnight, and then the temperatures kind of fell and then sort of stabilized somewhat. They certainly aren't looking like this now. Temperatures dropping off a good 10 degrees in many cases into those single digits that we're talking about as that cooler air moves in and those winds change direction. The radar does show you, though, the bands of showers now continuing to move eastward and push through, even though there were some breaks at times, still had that back edge to get through. And then this particular model really breaks the cloud cover up pretty nicely. The Canadian model wants to leave a bit more in, and I think there will be, like I said, just a few areas where it's going to take a bit more time. Once we get into it, though, boy, oh boy, we've got several days there where we're going to be looking at very nice sky conditions, so really, really pleasant. And just a bit of extra cloud cover, that's Thursday night into Friday morning, not during the day. That'll just help the overnight temperature from falling off too much. So a look at those winds. I said, yeah, they were blustery. We had some gusts today, 50, 55 kilometers an hour. We'll be finding those backing right off. And a look at your temperatures then tonight with the clearing. That's going to take some getting used to, down to 2 for Windsor and for Leamington, but tomorrow 13 or 11, pardon me. And that reset of the temperatures where we'd cool down, you can see it doesn't last long and they start to creep up again. Creep.
Exactly.
Ooh, creep towards Halloween.
Good word. Thanks for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
And we will be right back. Welcome back. Hockey Canada is making new moves in the wake of the controversy that has shattered its reputation. It will not be collecting its annual participants fee for the upcoming season. That fee is typically just $3 per player, but that money goes to the fund that Hockey Canada has used to settle sexual assault allegations. The National Equity Fund has paid out millions in multiple cases, including an alleged group sexual assault involving the 2018 World Juniors team. Some provincial hockey associations were already withholding those fees from Hockey Canada. The federal government and most of Hockey Canada's major corporate sponsors have already cut their funding to the organization. Now, before we leave you tonight, there are more leaves off the trees, and it is beginning to feel a lot like Halloween in Windsor. This is a great video from our Mike Evans. Is it me, or does it seem like a lot of Windsorites are going all out with Halloween decorations this year? So many elaborate displays from the West End to downtown to South Windsor. Trick-or-treaters are in for a spooky Halloween this year. We want to know what types of Halloween decorations you've seen in your neighborhood, so send us your photos so that we can share them with our viewers. Tweet at us, email us at windsor@cbc.ca, or send them over Facebook at CBC Windsor. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.